I've always been passionate about video games. I mean, you could truly say the only reason this channel is here is because I wanted to talk about them. Looking at some of my older videos, I mean, come on, you should have expected something like this to come sooner or later. I feel like my interests are fairly diverse, having grown up through several console lifetimes. But despite this, I don't find myself actually buying many games, primarily because I'm too busy to play them, so I only get a handful each year. And honestly, I've been disappointed so many times that I just don't get excited for games anymore. I've always found that unsuspecting games are the ones that I enjoy most. With that in mind, Fire Emblem Awakening was my introduction to the Fire Emblem series, and I was pretty enthralled with it, sharing it with my friends who have never played it. I was always the kid in high school with very deep pockets. No, not the rich kid. I was the one who had the 3DS sticking out of my pocket. The one doing the lunatic Iron Man run of Fates Conquest, and ending the game with only 8 units instead of paying attention during class like I probably should have been. And even though Fates prioritized waifu titty bait over a competent story, I still enjoyed it regardless because I recognized it for what it truly was. Waifu titty bait. But I was fascinated by the narrative choice that Fates decided to have. 3 seemingly parallel stories of one greater narrative, all with different perspectives, and this is what I wanted to talk about with this video. The answer to why I dumped 325 hours into Fire Emblem Three Houses was because of perspective. Trying to understand things from multiple angles, recognizing the strengths and weaknesses of every argument, and hopefully coming away with a better understanding of the world and characters that inhabit it. I know currently we're living in a culture where people are so set in their ways to disregard, excise, and cancel those that they totally disagree with. We oftentimes forget to recognize that people might, shockingly, have a perspective different than our own. Oh, I know, the horror of it. Perspective is something integral to how we play video games as a whole, whether it's top-down, side-scroller, first-person, or third-person. It's so difficult to manage perspective, not only in-game, but in the other media that we enjoy. And perspective may not even be important enough to you in the media that you enjoy. You might find gameplay more important. Perspective is the primary reason I love JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, because it interestingly captures the different goals and motivations of a single bloodline in reaction to the consistent force that plagues their very existence. Three Houses is the logical extension of what Fates tried to accomplish. Fire Emblem Fates pits 2 warring countries against each other and forces you to pick one or neither, giving 3 separate routes with different characters, maps, enemies, and outcomes. While Fates speed ran the process of getting you invested in characters over about 6 chapters before making a branching choice, Three Houses opts to extend the length of time you play with your characters for about 13 chapters, at the cost of locking the player into the route they choose from the beginning. This forces you, the player, to grow a better understanding of each faction. And this is where Three Houses passes with flying colors. Many of the characters grow on you, not only with more insight into their support conversations, but how they all react to the same events leading up to a certain branch point where the story almost entirely diverges. Simultaneous narratives are superior to dueling narratives. What do I mean? Well, for example, The Last of Us Part 2 is a dueling narrative where 2 opposing perspectives are portraying themselves as the protagonists at any given moment during a single narrative. Rarely, if ever, is this pulled off effectively. I would say a series like Attack on Titan tries this a little bit better, but still doesn't do it well. Simultaneous narratives exist in tandem with one another, as if being parallel universes to each other. They choose to forego portraying multiple perspectives at once during a single narrative path, instead focusing on a singular vision that can drastically change the outcome of events between each path. The success of this narrative structure comes from experiencing this work of fiction as a complete whole, instead of completely disregarding one side of the same narrative for a certain period of time in order to prop up other characters and motivations that you might not even be invested in or want to be invested in. This is why characters introduced secondary or tertiary to the initial cast feel misguided, problematic, deranged, and oftentimes narratively bankrupt.
You're a piece of shit, Abby. You always have been.
characters in a simultaneous narrative structure are allowed to fully develop with respect to their own goals and motivations that may have been overlooked in another route. I don't think I would have enjoyed the experience of playing this game so much had I not done it in the order that I did, though. Coming from the perspective of someone who dumped almost 2 weeks of real-world time into a single game, the order I played it to get the best experience is Azure Moon, Silver Snow, Verdant Wind, and finally Crimson Flower. Now, I didn't actually get this game at launch, and I know there were a couple of free content updates because the game wasn't totally complete, but I started playing at Christmas of 2019 and just finished the game about 2 weeks ago at the time of this recording. I also had the opportunity to play the Ashen Wolves DLC after my first playthrough, which not only helped flesh out the world of Darragmach Monastery, but also brought in some of my favorite characters and very, very broken DLC items that helped me with this game. So I think the idea of perspective is very valuable to a story like this. This game is like a mystery, and with each route, more and more clues are dropped, painting a fuller picture of the world. I started with Azure Moon because you guys told me to on the community tab, and this was actually the best choices possible since Azure Moon is the most complete singular path, and it's all about Dimitri. The story is not interested in exploring the lore, questioning your morals, but instead opts to take a very traditional Fire Emblem route while exploring concepts of psychological trauma, regret, and forgiveness. Amazing, a story about ending the cycle of violence that isn't actually patronizing the audience. Wow.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
Yes! Silver Snow was dipping my toes into the lore of this world. It's been a long time since I've been so invested in uncovering lore behind a game, and part of that comes from how the game chooses to disseminate information to the player. You're learning all the information from the perspective of someone living away from the influence of the Church of Seiros. Byleth's experience with crests, the Church, the Empire, the Kingdom, the Alliance, foreigners, and those who slither in the dark are all you're the players. And while Byleth's responses to most conversations are adequate, the game's immersion is severely hindered by not having Byleth's voice actor reply to each prompt. But Silver Snow was definitely a drop in the bucket compared to Verdant Wind, considering they follow almost identical story routes, where Silver Snow covers the bonds of kinship, devotion to family, and so on and so forth. In relation to Lady Rhea, the existence of crests, and the dark forces of Fodlan, Claude exists to bring a fundamentally new dawn to the isolationist nation, opening up Fodlan means breaking down the barriers that the church has instilled on the populace. Both Dimitri and Rhea fought to maintain the status quo in face of an opposing force, where Claude thinks about changing the world through evolution instead of revolution. Claude's route also delves further into the reason for why Byleth is who she is, what drives her ability to wield the sword of the creator, the true goals of the puppeteers behind the scenes, and of course, the meaning behind the intro cutscene that I've seen 3 times up until this point. Claude envisions an idealistic world which doesn't harbor the power of the ruling elites, and the discrimination that comes with them. There's dismay between the haves and have-nots, a true class struggle that is finally beginning to take form. However, you must wait until you choose to side with Edelgard to get the full picture. Crests are a symbol of nobility, but it takes it a step further by showing that that power physically manifests itself through stat bonuses, special combat arts, and sacred weapons. The hero's relics were said to be bestowed by the goddess, an inherent quality of individuals that gave them more power over others. This creates a perspective of seeing characters with attributes that make them physically stronger than others, and it helps reinforce the idea that some people are meant to be at the top while others are not. That vision is completely rejected by Edelgard.
My resolve has not faltered. I'm determined as ever to see this through to the end. I will defeat the false goddess. I will save this world from those creatures and give humanity its freedom back.
This gives me a chance to briefly talk about the soundtrack and how the song Edge of Dawn or Seasons of Warfare perfectly encapsulates both Byleth and Edelgard's roles in their respective routes. Edge of Dawn can be taken from the perspective of Byleth chasing a new dawn of Fodlan with Dimitri, Claude, or Rhea, but is recontextualized once you understand Edelgard's true motivation. It's not as simple as world domination, but it's very easy to see it as such in other playthroughs. With Dimitri's route, his deteriorating mental state is a necessary distraction from the archaic system that dictates their world. Claude chooses to smash down Fodlan's locket and reshape the world in a new future. which again harkens back to how important Byleth is in making that dream come true. Crimson Flower takes the long road, and as fierce as a fire, shouts with the roar of dominion to blitz through Fodlan and free the people from the clutches of the monster lurking behind the shadows. I mean, I seriously can't get over how much I love this soundtrack. It's probably my favorite video game soundtrack, and I can make a whole video talking about it, but I think it just barely dethrones Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Time and Darkness. It really made this 325-hour journey so much more pleasant to listen to.
Oh, and then there's the operatic section. You're gonna love it.
The operatic section.
Tiki?
Edelgard in Crimson Flower asks the question, is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? No, says the kingdom of Fargus. It belongs to the nobles. No, says the archbishop. It belongs to the goddess. No, says the Duke of Leicester. It belongs to the Alliance of States. Edelgard's belief in meritocracy breaks down the establishing ruling class of Fodlan. And hey, that's a message I can get behind. Edelgard's motivations stem from the unfortunate way the need for Crest twisted her family, leaving her permanently scarred, but with unforeseen power beyond every other being. Depending on which route you take, she chooses to either embrace those powers, totally rejects them, or fails. War doesn't have a happy outcome. You're forced to kill students you raised and interacted with 5 years ago. It's tough and kind of heartbreaking to watch, and at points it subverts your expectations and occasionally gives you a chance to persuade those to your cause, even sparing some of them. Crimson Flower is easily the most impactful of the routes in Three Houses, if you had played through the others before it, which is what I believe the developers intended to do because they make getting to this route considerably more difficult than the other routes, because it's conditional based on the support levels and conversations you choose to have on one specific day. While some may find that a bit tedious, I find it brilliant, rewarding players for getting more and more invested with their students and characters and finding secrets around the monastery. Characters have fundamentally different perspectives in different routes that mirror each other, which is so awesome to see. The best one I can think of off the top of my head is Dorothea, a character I recruited in every run, for obvious reasons, whose perspective is formed around which lord is commanding her at the time, but never diverting fully from her goals. There were 4 specific moments that made me fall in love with this game, and this is the part of the video where I say spoilers are incoming, so if you haven't played the game and you want to experience it for yourself, then skip to this point in the video, come back once you've played it because this video isn't going anywhere and you're definitely missing out on an awesome game. On my first playthrough of Azure Moon, the conversation in the rain between Byleth and Dimitri post-time skip depicts a man struggling with a crisis of character. You've seen this troubled prince endure a downward spiral of revenge, regret, obligation, and bloodshed, all stemming from the tragedy at Dusker. Simply by outstretching your hand, you offer this man a chance, a ray of hope to pull him out of despair, to live for what you believe in.
But then who or what should I live for? What I believe in. Rodrigue said the same thing. But is it possible? I am a murderous monster. My hands are stained red. Could one such as I truly hope for such a life? As the sole survivor of that day, do I have the right to live for myself? Your hands are so warm. Have they always been?
The second is based on a gameplay mechanic that comes from Verdant Wind's Paralogue involving the Desert Beast. Gameplay-wise, Three Houses' traditional Fire Emblem feeling isn't lost inside or outside of battle. But when I saw Sylvain's brother transform into one of those boss battles, it just kind of blew me away the first time. By this point in Verdant Wind, you've come across many of those beasts. However, this one stood out than all the other ones. It looked oddly familiar to a creature on the painting of Sothis that you see during the main menu cutscene, or hear in the soundtrack videos on YouTube. Now, I knew that the goddess was Sothis, and I knew the Immaculate One was Rhea, but I had no clue who this creature was right here. Early on in the game, Sedith and Flame request that you remember the names of the 4 holy saints that helped Seros defeat Nemesis in the opening cutscene: Keyhole, Sethleen, Indek, and Macuel. I knew what happened to Keyhole and Sethlene, and I heard in some support conversations that Indek was chilling at the bottom of a lake, but nothing about Macule crossed my mind.
I smell those detestable 10 elites. Who are you?
I'm the grandson of the grandson of the grandson of the elite Regan. Now tell me who you are.
I am your family's enemy. If you carry the blood of the 10 elites, you cannot be permitted to live.
What do you mean by that? And what's that crest on your forehead?
You have the stink of Sothis upon you. Let us find out whether you share power.
I've got you.
Now's our chance.
My suspicions were confirmed when I positioned Sedith to fight this monster. There are several unique dialogue options that pop up here and there for certain characters. They range from hilarious to tragic and even downright brutal. Sedith confirmed that the beast my army was facing was his comrade from centuries ago, a detail that could have easily been glossed over considering that this was in a paralogue, an optional route. So nothing was forcing you to see this in the game.
Are these your companions?
They are indeed. I should tell you that Seros is in a precarious state right now.
I will not assist you. I have lived apart from the world of man, which disgusts me so. This war disgusts me also.
I thought you might say as much. That is regrettable.
I won't fail.
With the combination of certain characters from different houses, you're even able to get more paralogs that provide you with more powerful relics and lore, and now I'm really hitting myself that I never had Leonie and Linhardt in the same roster to explore that lore even further. The third was during the capture of Deirdre, during Crimson Flower. This chapter managed to blow me away in several ways. First, by the persuasion of Lysithea for my main cause, considering that her and Edelgard share a fundamental hate for those who slither in the dark.
It's over.
That's the last of my energy. If you're gonna kill me, make it quick. Fair warning, though, I'll likely come back to haunt you. It's not like I've had an easy time of it after all. You want me to join you? The Alliance is over no matter what. The only thing left is to place faith in you and Edelgard. There's still so much I have to accomplish. Thank you for the second chance, Professor.
The next was seeing Balthus' hesitance to kill Hilda because of their relationship with Holst.
Back off, Hilda. Holst wouldn't want this.
No, Balti, you back off. I'm right where I want to be. If you kill me here, I won't be the one my brother holds responsible.
If that happens, offering my life is the least I can do to make it up to him. That, and bringing you home.
It's been fun, Claude. Sorry to go so soon.
Since we all started living here, I'd look at you and think boobs. That's it. You are boobs. Just boobs.
And finally, the option to spare or kill Claude. Going into each route without spoilers definitely helped the surprise factor of these narrative choices and made me feel more emotion from this experience than many other games in the last few years. I guess I should have prefaced this conversation by saying the fact that you don't have to spend 300 plus hours to actually enjoy this game or get the full picture. I would spend enough renown to get 10 activity slots at the beginning of each playthrough just to do as many things as possible. But those encounters were a precursor for my favorite chapter of the game. Chapter 17 of Crimson Flower. Everything hits the right notes here, from the downpour of grief symbolized by the ever-present rain to the muddy wasteland that slows the Empress, King, and Saint into a long, grueling conflict. A conflict that fully represents the experience of playing Fire Emblem Three Houses. It was on the Tailtean Plains where I realized something truly remarkable. The Black Eagle's house had significantly less crest wheelers than the other two houses. Hubert, Dorothea, Caspar, and Petra don't have a crest. Ferdinand bears the crest of Keyhole, Bernadetta bears the crest of Indek, Linhardt bears the crest of Sethlene, and Edelgard bears the crest of Seiros. Remember how I mentioned the 4 saints from before? Macuol never bore any children. The only people who bear crests are those who fought on the same plains 1,000 years ago. Edelgard fills the same role that Rhea did in that battle that you see at the beginning of the game. And she fights not only for the benefit of herself, but for the members of her house without crests and the rest of Fodland. She fights with her own group of saints to bring an end to the war, and recognizing that parallelism just blew my mind. Field of Revenge shows you the culmination of what this whole world built up to, and I kind of feel sorry for those who played it on their first run, but with the hindsight of the entire game in the context of the character, the lore, the other routes, it's a truly standout level that made all 325 hours worth it.
There was nothing I could do to save him, and so, the very least I could do was... No. The Edelgard who shed tears died many years ago. Everything that's happened, it's all just part of the ebb and flow of history. The tragedy of Duscur, our days at the Academy, Father's death, and the 5 years you were gone. After all of that, at long last, we're here, at this point in time. I hope you'll stay by my side until the very end.
After pushing Edelgard's ideals to the limit with Chapter 17 of Crimson Flower, the final cutscene pulls an unexpected twist by freeing Byleth of the crest stone in her heart. This not only represents freedom from the system that oppressed them for so long, but freedom from this story. Crimson Flower draws many parallels to the other routes, while taking a shorter and more focused approach to many of the characters and ideals inside of it. Just as Byleth held Rhea in her arms, Edelgard holds you. As part of Rhea's plan, you can choose to coincide with the system or free yourself and your own humanity out of it. Understanding the true weight behind this scene almost requires going through the other routes before it. And while you don't fight those who slither in the dark at the end of Crimson Flower, that's not what this route is truly about. It was always about the conflict between Edelgard and Rhea. Those who slither in the dark were a narrative tool that were dealt with in Silver Snow and Verdant Wind. Just like how Azure Moon is only based on the conflict between Dimitri and Edelgard. Verdant Wind is a little out of left field, but Claude's fascination with the Sword of the Creator makes the final antagonist, and the ending theme along with it, truly a spectacle. And Silver Snow's ending was, well, Silver Snow. Silver Snow? More like Silver No. I mean, I was always a Pokemon Gold person. Heart Gold's the best! But that doesn't mean I dislike playing all of the games in any of the routes. All of them have a different goal in mind with what they're trying to accomplish, and I can honestly respect that considering those concepts are basically non-existent in Fates. Fates was a cool idea, but Three Houses honed it into something that actually mattered. Three Houses is a game that manages to make sure you care about the characters, who are not one-note cardboard cutouts like in its predecessor. Of course, being fully voice acted, and the hardware jump to the Switch definitely helped, and there were many scenes that humanized characters who may have seemed flat in other routes. Edelgard could be hated in one route and loved in another. Claude could seem scheming in one route and idealistic in another. Dimitri could be a mindless bore in one route, but a broken man in another. Rhea could seem like a caring mother in one route, or a heartless monster in another. The perspective difference you gain from each of these characters for each of these routes is astounding, and that's why I'm a bit more forgiving that the story does have some of the plot holes that it does on each different path. These 4 narratives are meant to be enjoyed together as a greater whole instead of by themselves. That is an incredibly risky narrative decision considering it didn't pay off for Fates and was probably a bit overly ambitious for the original scope of the development team. And at some points it definitely does show, but that still doesn't detract from my enjoyment of the game. Now don't get me wrong, this is not a perfect game by any stretch of the imagination. Byleth's voice actor should have been more involved. Silver Snow shouldn't have been 90% Verdant Wind. Crimson Flower could have been a bit longer and had more than one pre-rendered cutscene. Cindered Shadows and Abyss could have been incorporated into being something other than a pocket universe. Constance is best girl, and I still don't know why I can't romance her as Femme Byleth.
Perhaps that is true.
I mean, the list goes on and on, but for me, I can acknowledge those flaws and still regard it as my favorite Fire Emblem game and one of my favorite games of all time. But that's everything I wanted to say about Fire Emblem Three Houses right after finishing the game. I really found the characters, lore, and narrative choices interesting, and I felt like it just had to spew all my thoughts with this video. I did notice that Fire Emblem videos aren't super popular, but maybe you guys will like this, maybe you won't, I don't know. If you do like this style of video, let me know in the comments below. Make sure that you do all the YouTube stuff by liking, subscribing, and turning on all notifications. We've got some awesome videos planned for the future, some related to my traditional type of content and others like this that don't. I hope you all have a beautiful Dueling, and I'll see you all next time.